and I'm a product manager at Tableau. I'm working on the dashboards team, and we've worked on things that you might have seen in the keynote today, like viz transparency, buttons, and objects. Nice, thanks. I'm pretty new to Tableau. I just graduated from the University of North Carolina, and when you move to Seattle, you don't meet that many people from the South. Is anyone from the South here? Oh, do you all love Bojangles? I miss it so much. So when I found out that our next speaker was from the DC area, I was so excited. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Cisneros, one of our newest Zen masters. Mike makes visualizations and analyses for Washington, D.C. area analytics and software companies. He's recognized for beautiful visualizations that tell clear and compelling stories, innovation and new techniques, and hundreds of Tableau public vizzes. Mike Cisneros has also won Vizzy Awards for Best Storyteller and Best Designer, and a couple or multiple Tableau Viz of the Days. I follow him on Twitter, and he's constantly pushing himself and encouraging others to think deeply about data. Today, he's here to share about his experiences in how and why to get started making public data visualizations. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mike.
Yeah, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the other side of the world for this talk. I appreciate it. But you are all in the right place. I imagine that there are some beginners here. I imagine there are some experts here, and everybody in between. Some of you are probably looking for practical tips. Some of you are probably looking for advice on how to approach data visualization. And some of you might just be looking for some advice or inspiration. And this talk is actually designed for all of you, the way that I think that public data visualization is also for all of you. So there are 5 things I want to talk about today. The first is I want to convince everybody in this room that you are already capable of doing public visualizations. The second thing is more for people who are just beginning. I want to give you some practical tips and strategies on how to get started making public data viz. The third thing is for people who have already started and are pretty good, but you want to go beyond good to excellent. You want to go from being a competent data visualizer to a confident data visualizer. The fourth thing I'm going to talk about is how to find your own unique voice, and then deal with some of the ramifications of becoming a unique voice, both positive and negative. And the last thing, to me, is the most important thing, which is to talk about why I think it's our responsibility to do our data visualization work in public. So, for those of you who never put your work out in public before, maybe because you think you're not good enough, or you're too intimidated by the other things that you're seeing, or you think that people will be too critical, I'm here to tell you that you are mistaken. If you are here in this room, or if you're watching this recording later, hello people in the future, then logic tells me that you are all ready to viz in public, because there's only 3 things that you need in order to be ready to viz in public. Are you watching a video about Tableau? Are you here at Tableau conference? Then you're committed to Tableau. Are you interested in data viz? Yes, you're here at a Tableau conference. And if you want to learn and improve, you're all here because you do want to learn, because you do want to improve. That's literally all you need to be ready to do viz in public. In fact, here's a statement that's true of everybody here today. Whether you realize it or not, you are already an artist. Because what is art anyway? What is an artist? What is the role of an artist in society, traditionally? In a single word, the artist's job is to convey truth. Truth about everything. They've always been the people who've examined the world around them and told the truth about the world regardless of their consequences. Truth about the human condition. Truth about politics, about life, about science, about nature, about everything under the sun. And when you think about it, isn't that what we already do every day with the data that we use, with the analyses we create, the code that we write? Our jobs, actually, is to tell the truth one way or another. We are in the business of telling the truth to as many people as possible, as honestly as we can. Now, imagine that our true understanding of the world is hidden behind a giant wall. It's infinitely high and it's infinitely wide. The only way you can learn the truth about the world is to open a window in this wall somehow. That's the artist's job. The artist's job is to open windows on the part of the world that we experience and that we understand and that we live in. But of course, one person can't open all of the windows onto the world. One person can't reveal everything about our entire world. That's why we all have to do it. We all have to open our windows on the world. We are all artists whose job it is to open as many windows as we can to provide people with multiple perspectives on the world. Because it's only through seeing these multiple perspectives that we can have a fuller, true understanding of the world in which we live. So, if you've never done a public data viz before, let me get you started now real quickly. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus on Tableau as a tool of choice for obvious reasons. Earmuffs, Tableau people. I don't care what tool you use, just do something. If you don't have access to your own copy of Tableau Desktop, go to public.tableau.com, download it. It's not a full-featured copy of Desktop, but it's good enough to get you started. You can work on whatever data sets you want to. Then create your own account on public.tableau.com. This will be your own public viz gallery. It'll become a good history of your own Tableau development, and eventually it will be a pretty good portfolio. This is mine from recently. This is what yours will look like at some point, but that comes later. First thing you're going to do is make some vizzes. Now, if you haven't done a lot of public vizzing yet, I would suggest that you start with one of the many collaborative initiatives that have sprung up around the Tableau community. Working alongside of your peers is going to keep you on track, and it's going to give you more support as you grow as a developer. Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, these are established and popular initiatives that really focus on instruction and, oh, I'm sorry. Who's reading ahead here? But yeah, besides Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday, which are intended for personal development and for you to become better at visualizing in a supportive environment, there are many companies, there are many schools, there are many organizations that have also decided to do this kind of collaborative initiative as well. It really doesn't matter which one of these or all of these or any other initiatives that are out there that you join. What's important is that you get started. You pick an environment that's going to work for you and you follow through with it. So as you set out on your journey, don't worry about what your personal starting level of ability is or how you compare to other people that you see in the community. Focus on whatever is going to make tomorrow's version of you better than today's version of you. You are not competing with other people in the community. You are only competing with yesterday's version of you. So start by setting yourself some specific personal goals. And when I say specific, they can be technical, they can be design-oriented, they can be whatever you like as long as they're SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. This will help you to personalize your own experience as a developer. It will keep your expectations reasonable, it'll keep you focused from week to week, and just be sure that they're goals, when you decide on what they're going to be, that you control. Don't pick goals that depend on what other people's opinions are or other people validating the work that you're doing. Next, you should commit to a plan of practicing and publishing regularly, because practice is the best way to improve, and publishing is the best way to make yourself accountable, because you are going to have a community of people who are going to be there to support you and push you to do things more and more. Now, when you practice, you get better, and when you publish, you feel a satisfaction of creating something and putting it out in public. And when it becomes a habit, when you start to habituate this process, you're going to find that you feel a lot more success because you're going to be publishing a lot more. And that's going to make you want to practice more. And then you're going to end up publishing more. It's the opposite of a vicious cycle. It's a wonderful cycle. So now let's jump forward in time a bit. Everyone's going to develop at their own unique pace. Everybody's going to come into this experience with different abilities, different attitudes, different aptitudes. And everybody has different pre-existing obligations on their time. We've talked about this already. This isn't a competition with anyone except the version of you from the past. So technically, you're all going to develop at different rates. But you will all get better, I promise you. And you will see yourself getting better over time. So let's say at this point in time, you've picked out some goals for yourself, you've started publishing regularly, you're working in some kind of collaborative initiative for between a few months and several months. You're going to start to see some improvement happen. And you're going to see progress towards the goals that you've set out for yourself just by virtue of practice and repetition. You'll know the software better. You're not going to run into as many dead ends. You're going to learn how to make charts that don't come from the Show Me menu. You're going to know where to turn for help, and not just what resources are out there, what blogs are out there. You're going to know actual people who are going to be able to help you, and not just able to help you, willing to help you, eager to help you. You're going to find charts that you didn't know existed, and beyond that, you're going to know how to create them because you're going to download them and figure them out and maybe even create some of your own. You'll have seen people do things in Tableau that you didn't even know were possible, and you'll have learned how to recreate them on your own. But we want to go beyond what this is. This is competence. We want to go beyond competence all the way to confident. We want to go from good to excellent. And in order to do that, it's going to take some intentional efforts. So by intentional efforts, what I mean is you're going to have to learn to critically assess the approach that you take to creating data visualizations, and you're going to have to learn how to push your boundaries in a couple of different directions. So I'm going to start by talking about critically assessing your approach, and that's mastering what I've started to call the 3 pillars. They're the 3 elements that I think are essential to every successful public data visualization. And in fact, everything that goes into creating a data viz can be assigned to one of these 3 categories. And when all 3 of these pillars are present, your viz is going to feel complete, compelling, strong. And when you see vizzes that are missing some of these pillars, you're going to know that it feels incomplete somehow not as compelling, even if you can't quite put your finger on what it is. Now, the 3 pillars I'm talking about are analysis, design, and storytelling. And you hear these words used a lot in the Tableau community and in the data viz community as a whole. And there's debate about these terms. Some people have different definitions for what's analysis, what's design. Some people think that there's a different order of operations. Can you do one before the other? But I have 3 simple definitions that I use for each of these pillars. Analysis, at its very simplest level, is what you find. Design, at its very simplest level, is how you make that finding clear. And storytelling, at its very simplest level, is why that finding matters. Whenever I create a public data viz, I'm trying to convey one specific analytic finding. I'm trying to make people able to understand as clearly as possible what it is I'm telling them and make them understand why I'm bothering to tell it to them. What's interesting about this finding? When you master the 3 pillars approach, your visualizations are going to get much better, and it's not just a technical thing, it's an approach thing. So let's go through them in detail a little bit. Analysis starts before you even build your first chart. It starts with your data. Anything that you put into your viz should be something that you can understand and explain to people. And that means you should understand the meaning of every column in the tables that you use, but beyond that, you should also know about your data. You should know how it was collected, by whom, when was it collected, for what purpose. If it's possible to know these things, try and figure them out, because you should understand what the implications are of what the data is showing, as well as what the data is not showing. Because data does not exist in a vacuum. It is collected by humans. It is collected about humans, and it's collected for humans. And before any data ever hits your computer, a billion decisions have been made on that data by people. And you need to figure out what those decisions were and why they were made. And as an example, I'm going to go back to a Makeover Monday data set from 2017. This was about the secrets of success. This graphic purports to answer the question, what are the main reasons for people's success? Now, it's a pretty graphic. It gets your attention. It's kind of a weirdo chart, but at least it's creative. This is the subheader that was on the chart. It says that poor people need to change their approach to success because it's evident from the responses that they don't have the right idea of what the secrets are to success. What possible data could you have that would tell you that that is the outcome of the data set? Unless you magically know exactly what the secrets to success are. Do you think this data set had that in it? This data set had 24 rows. You are looking at the complete data set. This data set had 3 different social strata, rich, middle class, and poor. It gave you 8 possible reasons for success, ranging from internal reasons like hard work, entrepreneurial spirit, to external reasons like good luck or connections, like family connections. And there was a percentage. The percentage purported to be how many people in that social strata said that this reason was a reason for success. So the best thing that you could theoretically do with this data is say, well, and this is if you analyze this data, you say, well, the rich people tend to say that it's internal reasons for success are more likely, and poor people say that it's external reasons for success are more likely. But the thing is, I'm not even sure we can say that, because we really don't know that much about this data. Like, who asked for this data? When did they ask for this data? Why did they ask for this data? We don't know any of that. What defines social strata? Where does it break down between rich, middle class, poor? Who are the people? Who was surveyed? How many people are we talking about? And how were they distributed? Was it an even geographic or demographic mix? We really have no idea. Now, I am one of the most skeptical people you will meet. But Chris Love is even more skeptical than I am and more dogged, and he has a much stronger Google foo sense than I do. And he managed to track down the source of this data set. This data set was collected by a Russian polling company in 2011, maybe 2012. We don't know. Who knows? It was one or the other. We found a couple of different sources. What was the breakdown between rich, middle class, and poor? It was if they said they were rich or middle class or poor. Are people likely to say they're rich if they're rich? Are people likely to think that they're rich if they're rich? Not really. So who was in this survey? 1,500 Russian people. This is not a universal subset of people. This was Russian people, 1,500. How many people said they were rich? 1%. So there are 15 people in this data set who are the entire rich strata. And we don't know how the rest of it was distributed. But what you would assume is that it's relatively evenly distributed until you start to interrogate your data. Oh, by the way, you could answer yes to 2 or 3 of the questions. Again, we have no idea. So this is a difficult data set to work with, but it looks fine when you first look at it. You have to learn to interrogate your data and figure out what's behind it, what's missing, what don't we know about it, before you can make assessments like was made by the person who said, oh yeah, this clearly says that poor people are wrong in their ideas about what success is. So it's obvious when you have what's not sufficient to make the claims the original designer made, you need to find more data. Or you need to focus on answering a more limited question. Because only when you understand your source materials can you start building charts, can you start looking for outliers, start looking for patterns. And then when you find those outliers and patterns, that's when you should again ask yourself, can I explain these? Is there a logical explanation for this? Does it make sense from an analytic standpoint, or maybe am I missing something else that I might need to go seek out? And then when you get that sense of what the message is, just make sure that you're not mistaking correlation for causation or randomness for patterns. All right. Well, let's move on to the second pillar now, design. So during my own development as a public visualizer, I began to acquire a reputation, in quotation marks, for good designs. And what people meant by this was that they liked the way that I used imagery, or they liked the way that I used color in my Tableau visualizations, because that was an uncommon approach. And while I do have a graphic design background, and I do have a lot of practice in applying these techniques to my designs, that doesn't make a data viz good design. It's just like the success chart that we looked at. That was a good graphic design in that it catches your eye, it's unique, you stop and try and figure out what it is, but it doesn't, and it makes it a little bit memorable, but it's also misleading, it's also obtuse, and it could also be plain old useless. Design is not about being pretty, design is about being clear. So to make your findings clear, your design needs to emphasize what that finding is and de-emphasize everything else. That means not using things like boldface everywhere. If everything is bold, nothing is bold. Don't use bright colors, primary colors, for marks and charts and other elements of the designs that are not important. These distract people's focus. And speaking of color, your color palette has to make sense for the tone of the design. Tone means if you're making a design about mortality, about death, about disease, you don't use popping saturated colors. You don't use Comic Sans. You don't use bubble font. You need to match your choices about color and about type with the tone of the data that you are using. Now, there are lots of resources out there on the internet for color theory and typography, and I advise you to look for them on your own. But right now, just be aware that it's something to consider that makes your visualization stronger. Your design also has to take comprehension and accessibility into account. And I don't just mean thinking about people who have color blindness or other visual disabilities, but that is part of it. By comprehension, I mean you have to do right by your audience. There's a lot of things that you can convey in a very simple chart, and there's lots of things that you can convey in a very complicated chart. But if you're asking somebody to spend the time, even 10 seconds, to figure out what the heck is this complicated chart showing me, there had better be one hell of a payoff at the end of it. Because people like what they are familiar with. They don't like to be tasked with a lot of cognitive load for no payoff. You are not doing right by your audience if you're being complicated in the things you're designing when you could be simple. Means of consumption, that's more about make sure that you are designing your viz for mobile if you think that your people are going to be consuming it on mobile. If it's on desktop, do it on desktop. If you think it's a big story, a scrolly-telling design, do it that way. But more importantly, I want to focus on interactivity. Now, Tableau is designed for interactivity. But interactivity doesn't always help. You should only have the interactivity in your viz that actually supports the things that you are trying to show. There are tooltips by default everywhere in Tableau. Turn them off if they are not doing anything for you. Actions, you can have a lot of actions. You can have a lot of filters. Use them if it helps your message. If it does not help your message, do not use them. And here's another level to think about. What version of your viz is most likely to be seen by an audience? I will give you the answer, a flat file. That is what is most likely to be seen by your audience. Because that's how things get shared on social media. That's how things get passed around. So you should make sure that your design has at least 2 levels of comprehension, at least 2 levels of value. Think of a flat file of your viz as a movie trailer for the movie that your actual viz is. You should have something in it that is of value, something in it that piques people's interest, but that drives people to want to engage more with your viz later. Like, I know that is a controversial point to say that you have to make sure that things work in a flat file, but I'm telling you, if you're intended to do work in public, you can't expect people to immediately engage with an interaction right away because they don't necessarily have any interest in what you're trying to sell them yet. So, all told, design is about directing your audience's eyes, directing their minds where they need to focus. Make it easy for them to see, make it easy for them to understand, make it easier for them to remember the message. Now, this is not a Tufte-esque message of always maximize your data to ink ratio. Sometimes the best choice will mean that you use pictures and images to reinforce a message. Make it easier to understand and retain that message. But other times, it will mean you create a spare product, a minimal product. In the words of Tableau evangelist, fellow shoe enthusiast Andy Cotgreave, it depends. So, the third pillar, storytelling. My definition of storytelling isn't synonymous with narrative, although it can be a narrative format. It isn't synonymous with spin. It's all about providing context. Give your audience some background information. Give them a framework that they can understand the importance and the implications of what you found. At a simple level, it's about things like including reference lines, including alert marks, including comparative measures in your viz. But beyond that, it's including annotations or text boxes, informational diagrams, anything at all you can think of that would help for someone who's just seeing your work for the first time to understand the importance of the message you're trying to convey. Draw your viewers into the story, maybe with an attention-getting title. Some people advise you to use the Jeopardy version of titling, which is always put it in the form of a question. Use color. Use bold type. Use a striking layout to get people's attention. Then offer more information a little bit at a time. Be a guide. Be a teacher. Lead people through what is important in your viz piece by piece. You have to assume that your audience in a public data visualization world is smart, uninformed, and impatient. They are not dumb. They are intelligent. They just don't know anything about what you are telling them. You know your data way better at this point than any of them know your data because you've spent hours working on it and crafting it and putting it out in public. They don't know. They might not be interested in it yet. You need to be sure to inform them quickly, and quickly is the key word here, because most people who might have an attention span of about 5 seconds, you have to get their attention fast. Smart, uninformed, impatient. Or, failing that, build a mirror. What's a mirror? A mirror is any viz that people can find themselves in. If people can look at a viz and find their name, find their birthplace, their favorite band, their Hogwarts house, anything at all, they're going to engage with that viz because people's favorite subject is themselves. Now, this is a cheap trick, but in other ways, it's just going to be you leveraging human nature to get them to pay attention to the sorts of things that you think are important for them to look at. So analysis, design, storytelling. I found it. You can see it. Here's why it's notable. This is a key part of learning how to create data viz for a public audience, and it's the next part of your tool set beyond purely technical competency. Approach each product you create with this mindset, and it will make your analyses cleaner. It will make your design stronger, and it will make your messages more memorable. So as you get stronger in applying this 3 pillars approach to your creative process, you should start pushing your boundaries in a couple of directions. One direction is what kind of data you work in, and the other direction is what kind of techniques you experiment with. Now, in these collaborative initiatives that I'm suggesting you work in, you're often going to be presented with data sets. And as your confidence grows, you should be looking for related data sets that you can join with the provided ones and see how you can, my apologies, leverage a synergy between these data sets to bring your analyses to the next level. Beyond this, you should also start branching out on your own completely. Create data visualizations outside of any structured initiative. Now, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of freely available data sets out there. Here are a few sources. Here are some search engines. Some of them are repositories, government information, what have you. One is a newsletter down at the bottom. But the very last one is the important one, which is your own life. I don't have a URL for your own life. But it doesn't mean your quantified self. Well, it sort of does. Part of it is your quantified self. But all I mean is data that you collect yourself. Earlier this year, I did a data viz that was about choose your own adventure books. I wanted to look through choose your own adventure books, a staple of the children who grew up in the 70s and 80s, and figure out what were the paths through choose your own adventure books for a protagonist. How were they likely to get on? Were they going to survive? Were they going to succeed? What was going to happen? Was there any strategy to it? The problem is there's no data about Choose Your Own Adventure books available online. So what do? You buy Choose Your Own Adventure books off of eBay, and then you go through them page by page, and you encode them. You write down what each decision is, and you write down what kind of page this is and what the outcome is. And at the end, you have yourself a data set that you know where it came from, you have full confidence in, and you can create anything you want from it. You can do all kinds of analyses about how often kids reading these books, or the protagonists of these books, meet violent ends. It's a lot. What strategies are optimal for successful endings, or what books give readers more control over their destiny. Now, I'm not the only one who's done this. Luke Stanky built a viz that required him to manually track a huge number of events in the life of the first 4 months of his baby's life. It's like outfits worn, changes in the child's cognition, the regularity of diaper changes, demands of the feeding schedule, all kinds of things. Russell Spangler has also done this. He created a viz that required him to track all of his hikes through several national parks. He also tracked the environmental variables, he tracked the paths that he took, he tracked all kinds of stuff about the walks that he took through the national parks. One of my favorite vizes, Anya Ahern created this viz, Consumed. It was about all the things that she touched in a day. She categorized them as wants or needs. She categorized them whether they were, in her mind, female-specific or not female-specific. She categorized them as they were tools or food or furniture or what have you, and she let you search through organize them in different ways. And you'll notice something about all 3 of these vizes as well. They are all experimenting with visual design as well as experimenting with data they collect. And what I want to point out about these vizes is that they're very impressive visually, but what you are seeing is the end result of dozens and dozens of errors, dozens and dozens of failures. This is important, is because you need to experiment and have a lot of failures before your experiments end up with the successes that you see and you can put out on public. It's this kind of experimentation, it's this kind of pushing, it's this kind of going your own way and refining your approach in harmony with your technical development that's going to bring you to the next step of your public data viz journey, and that's finding your own voice. So, for me, personally, the end goal of being a public author was never just to get better. It was to become confident and experienced enough at data visualization to contribute something to the world, not just to the Tableau community, but to the entire world through data visualization. Now, for any of us to truly accomplish that, I believe that we all need to find our distinctive voices. And doing so, in almost all cases, can't be forced. It can't be rushed. It emerges over time with practice, with publication, with experimentation. Now, your voice might be defined by your visual style. Your voice might be designed by your analytic style. It could be the topics that you choose to gravitate towards, or the charts that you make, or any combination of these things. That's the thing. It's unique to all of us. But it will emerge eventually. And all the steps that we've talked about up until now are going to bring you to that point. And before we go on, I have a song clip to share with you to encourage you to use your voice rather than to try and figure out whatever voice you think will reach the widest audience. This is taken from a musical about creativity. The show is called Title of Show, and the song is called 9 People's Favorite Thing.
I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing. 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing. Those 9 people will tell 9 people, then we'll have 18 people loving the show. Then 18 people could grow into 525,600 people.
All right, Rent fans, love it. Finding your voice means knowing who you are and knowing what you want to say and not trying to predict whether an audience will like it or won't like it, because your audience will like it, because it represents you being true to who you are. It will be something that lets people understand the world they live in. It will be a window onto the truth of the world that you are able to provide, because it will be something that you understand from your own experience. And part of the thing about a viz being true for you has to do with the subjects that you choose to work on. Don't feel restricted to working only on the subjects that you see most often. That sports vizzes, pop culture vizzes. If that's what you love, then you absolutely should work on those things. And if those are not what you love, don't work on those things, because that's not going to end up with you being true to yourself. You are doing yourself a disservice when you're working on vizzes that you don't care about. It will not be your best work. It won't matter to you. Your best work is always, always, always going to be about something that you care about, something that's dear to your heart, something more personal, maybe less well known, but something people haven't even seen before, something people haven't considered. Maybe you're Nylusa and you decide to make a viz that talks about, in the midst of tragedy, a viz about how people, in the midst of the Syrian conflict, are struggling to carry on with their regular lives, and they're succeeding. Maybe you show this through a unique metric. You show this through the metaphor of active bakeries. You use the metaphor of bread, the stuff of life. Now, Nye is using a powerful tool here, and that tool is synecdoche. Synecdoche is when you use a part of something to refer to the whole. Like when you say, hey, Caesar, nice wheels, when you're telling him that you like his car. You are not telling him you like his tires. And interestingly, synecdoche is also the opposite. It's like when you say, God, I can't stand New England. You are not talking about hating 6 states. You are probably talking about the Patriots. Synecdoche is a powerful tool for a visualizer to convey a deeper message, to open a window onto their world, to tell a small story that stands in for the whole. Now, Nye used synecdoche here. In the other vizzes I pointed out earlier, Luke's viz also used synecdoche. He's talking about the first 4 months in his child's life, but it's really about how parenthood demands that you let go of your preconceived notions, changes your perspective on how structured your world can be. Russell's viz about visits to national parks, it's not just about his visits to national parks, it's about the natural world available to us right outside of our door. And how long will we have that natural world available to us? Anya's viz is about her items, but it's not really just about her items. It's about how we perceive items, how we perceive feminine items. Why do we think of them as wants rather than needs? Why do we think of things, why do we touch so many things in a day? How many of these things are actual needs? Vizzes like these, like Luke's, Russell's, Anya's, and Nye's, will capture smaller but deeper audiences than a pop culture viz. And each one of these vizzes will be 9 people's favorite thing. And those 9 people will tell 9 people. And those 18 people will grow into more and more. I'm just me, and I'm telling more than 100 people about them. And you'll tell more. Nye's viz, Bread and Salt, affected my view of the world. It opened a window to me that I didn't know could be opened. It used data to reflect the truth that she was able to see, and then I was able to see through what she created. You can do this. You all can do this. You all can take steps to get closer to being able to do this. But along the way, you are going to fail. I'd be surprised and worried and very skeptical if you didn't. Sometimes you will miss a self-imposed milestone. That's a small failure. Sometimes you put a complicated viz out in public that has errors in it. That is a medium failure. And sometimes you put vizzes out in public that are just flat out wrong. You've misinterpreted the data, maybe made some explosive conclusions on incomplete facts or on polls about presidential elections. Bigger failure. I've done all of these things, but I got through it. I dealt with a failure. I regrouped. I'm here. I'm still here today. I'm talking to you, no matter what embarrassing failures I've had. Here's my blueprint for dealing with failure. Own up to it. Don't try and argue that it wasn't a big deal. Don't actually your way out of it. Actually, you made a mistake. But it's cool. You can make mistakes as long as you apologize. You apologize publicly, apologize privately, take down the stuff that is actually a mistake. But most importantly, don't stop. Keep going. Dealing with failure is one thing, but you also have to deal with success. Why is success something that you have to deal with? Well, one reason is because success feels pretty good. And getting positive feedback from your peers, from the people that you look up to, is a powerful sensation. It's almost an intoxicating sensation at times. And that's dangerous, because you might find yourself starting to chase approval rather than chasing excellence. And you might care too much about the capricious opinions of the internet. And you might start to believe your own press and think that everything you do is perfect. I mean, look, our Tableau community is very generous. It's very supportive, and people here share positive feedback and ideas and congratulations freely, and the criticisms, if any, tend to be minor, they tend to be respectful, and they tend to be privately shared. But if you only ever hear positive feedback, you might get the idea that you don't have to do more to become a better data visualizer. As much as you shouldn't let failure stop you, you shouldn't let success convince you that you've gone as far as you need to go. So we've talked a lot so far about the how of public data viz. Now let's talk about the why. For instance, why is it good? We've talked about why public vizzing is good for you, but I'm talking about something larger and something more important. And that is, why is it inherently good? Why is it universally good? Now, the very nature of Tableau, of our data viz world, and of our community, and of this medium means that everybody can tell their story. Everyone. Everyone can tell their story and have it heard, and have it strengthened with data, and can reach a global audience, and have a network that will amplify that message. And throughout history, there's rarely been a platform so accessible for so many voices to speak out through, while also protecting these voices by demanding decency and consideration and factual accountability from the people who are participating. And you all here today, you are those voices. And together, you are a choir. And in fact, I'm going to borrow from organizer DeRay McKesson. Here's something he said recently, and it dovetails perfectly with how I feel. I'm interested in building the biggest choir possible. Anyone who's ever been in a church choir knows that it's a whole lot of work. It's not a passive experience. And I know there's so many people out there who are just waiting for an invitation to join the choir. They have a voice. They just don't believe that they can sing yet. What the best organizers do is say, come, sing with me. Let's learn new music. Teach me new music. And what the best teachers do is they say, you already had the gift. I'm here to make you realize you can access the gift long after I'm gone. Now, 20 seconds ago, I made a decision with the full attention of an audience of literally hundreds of people waiting for me to say anything at all. I remained silent. And that was my choice. And it seems foolish, and it seems uncomfortable, right? Why would you waste this opportunity? This is the same decision you all have in front of you right now. You have a platform. You have an audience. You have an audience waiting to hear you, an audience of hundreds, an audience of thousands waiting to hear you. And will you remain silent, or will you join the choir? Each one of you is ready. Each one of you has the gift of a data-oriented mind. You thrive on facts. You crave truth. You understand logic. You understand coding. You understand statistics. And you might dismiss these gifts as unremarkable. You think anybody can do that. And I'm telling you, you're wrong. There are people who think this is a magic trick. There are people who have no idea how you do the things you do. Not everybody can do what you all can do. Each one of you is ready to join this choir. Each one of you has music inside of you, new music to sing. Teach me your music. Teach me your music, especially if you are a person whose songs are never sung. Did you grow up hearing stories of others, stories that didn't relate to you? Did you yearn to hear stories from people like you about the things that matter to you, but never seem to be played on the radio or seen on TV or taught in schools? This is your opportunity to be that voice for other people. Join the choir. Use your gifts. Teach us new music. Tell us the data stories we don't know. Now, you might not yet know how to express your creativity exactly as you would like to. And you might not yet know what windows you will throw open to the world. And you might not yet know what the sound of your full voice will be. But here in the city, where music is part of the very fabric of life, where your community is gathered around you, what better time, what better place could there be? Step up, stand up, be brave, be bold. The world is crying out for the artist that you are, to harness the gifts you already have inside and sing to us the songs you already know by heart. Step up, stand up, be brave, be true. Start your public journey towards finding your own voice, towards learning to express your creative inner self, towards opening the windows that reveal the honest truth. Step up, stand up, be brave, be loud, and people everywhere will see with clarity at last the truths that you reveal together. Can you do this? Can you do this?
Yes.
Will you do this?
Yes.
Let's get started.
You want